The southern reaches of the Umgi princedoms were not so tainted by chaos as the north. Green grasses still grew, and crops were only just beginning to rot. There were even still scattered Umgi alive in the countryside. They converged on a point close to a fissure in the ground, seeking to confirm rumours that the mysterious dwarves had killed the overlord of chaos. They came upon a scene of mourning. The dwarves had a large funeral pyre under construction. In exchange for adding to this pyre, the humans were allowed to join the camp. About 2 days passed before the pyre resembled a mountain, complete with occasional firewood rockfalls. It remained unlit for another week, by which time thousands of humans had arrived, and the pyre was large enough to fully encapsulate all the fallen Dawi brought up from the underway, some in the silver-blue armour of old, others in the singed gold and black of Atalan. At last its flame was set, and the smoke column swirled in the restless sky. "Aye, a fair few were saying it," Khazran said. "The whole Umgi royal family, or imperial family, all mined up and, you know." "And it's no illusion there, is it?" Oldor asked. "No easy trick to pull, and given what else we've heard, I dare say there'd be no need for it." "No need, just want." "Could be that." "At least we slew the tyrant, clean in twain. Soon we'll have the other." "You mean the real one?" "Stop asking, Crumpson. Real is what we know, and we all saw Archon sent back to his sponsors in pieces." "We didn't all see that, my lord." "Khazran, be quiet," Story half whispered. "You've spread enough rumours already. If you insist it was all a ruse, you'll be strung up for madness." "As I ought to be. Madness abounds." "Madness and magic," Oldor sighed. "Archon is dead. We know that. Archon is alive. We know that too. That's the simple truth of it." "Easy enough to understand, isn't it?" Story added. Seeing no dent in their conviction, Khazran nodded and withdrew from the topic once more. He had been unable to press upon any of his comrades that the absence of chaos remains at the site of the battle was an issue. The notion simply didn't stick in anyone's mind but his. It seemed to Khazran that the entire affair had been a cruel illusion designed to execute the High King and his retinue. To everyone else, it was merely a case of having defeated a chaos army that so happened to have the properties of being invisible in death, and they weren't capable of hearing anything to the contrary. Such were the strange goings-on Oldor had warned of before they had departed, yet he himself was completely blind to it. And in the style most likely intended by the Chaos Gods, Khazran would only draw accusations of corruption onto himself if he really kicked up a stink about the supposed corruption of everyone else. At least there was one project that all could agree upon, and one that wasn't so entwined with the designs of the Chaos Gods. The collection of Umgi was taken south, towards the mouth of the Black Gulf. There was a beacon of hope on the coast. The city of Mirmidons still stood. This was only because it had been attacked not by Chaos proper, but by the Norse raiders from the sea, who had seen fit to simply brood on their prize and organize the gradual export of the population as slaves. Operating under the assumption of complete safety, they had no sentries posted and no night patrols arranged. Hence they woke up to axes at their necks, or simply did not wake up at all. About 200 Dawi cleared the city of thousands of warriors in a single night, leading to a day of elation at Oldor's arrival. The city became the only exit from the north. The Norse ships were used to ferry the refugees to Al-Haik, where another captured fleet was ready to join the convoy for the return trip, also backed with troops and military supplies. The seas were quiet, relatively speaking, with the naval wing of the Chaos invasion being limited to precisely the pirates the speedy longboats had been taken from. The crossings went back and forth every few days, trickling the last drips of the umgi into the citadels of Atalan. More carried on arriving at Mirmidons from the countryside, and even some Dawi came by from the western holds. All had fallen by then, of course. There was only one issue. Across all the downtrodden-looking folk being billeted in the half-ruined city, there was no chance at all that some weren't agents of chaos. Khazran's growing obsession with this topic had him inspecting the newcomers every day. Sometimes the issue was obvious if the subject was too far gone. Usually though, such secret loyalties were deeply hidden, impossible to discern at a glance. Khazran simply couldn't know how many such cases passed him by. He couldn't know how many cases of this persisted in the highest ranks of the Legion either. He only knew that he wasn't feeling any different. But what he didn't know is that even the red-eyed, barely human cultists he was rooting out would have said precisely the same thing of themselves. This hopeless sieving for danger on the surface only distracted from the real issue in the realm of Mirmidons, one from before the end times, the issue of the tunnels deep below the windy coast that spiraled up to hidden holes and hatches throughout the city. It was the Thorgrinn, the skaven, for whom the devastation on the surface was a mixed blessing, less food for them to steal away, yet far less security on that which remained. On balance, the skaven were thriving in the southern reaches of the old world. Their presence made itself known as the umgi of Mirmidons began to curl up with a virulent pox, one that spread to their Dawi minders within days. Before any countermeasure could be taken, the city was awash with disease, the dreaded skaven plague. It was sometimes deadly, and more often simply so tiring to endure that one couldn't resist the scurrying rats dragging them away in the night. The Legion ensured that such atrocities were kept to a minimum, at least. One night, early in the epidemic, Oldor and Khazran stayed up in a derelict noble parlour, spitting out greenish phlegm and debating their next course. "It's a few weeks at the least," Khazran said. "You can shake it, but that doesn't stop you getting it again." "Then we'll have to purge the tunnels and collapse them," Oldor said. "How many would it take to do that faster than the little buggers can dig them? You think the umgi didn't try stuff like that before the madness settled in? Fat chance we'd have of closing that book now." "Then there's only one option, a cure." "Don't just stare at me, my lord. Would I withhold a cure if I had one?" "You know how the Thorgrinn mind works." "When it comes to setting things ablaze, this is entirely new." "You're missing the point. The solution is the same as at Atalan." "You mean you want to go after them?" "Aye, the source of it. Somewhere they've got brewers making infected pus to cultivate the disease. That's how it spreads so quickly. They lace water, they poison air. You can understand it. Reverse it." "You're claiming this is all stuff I already know. Seems like you're the expert here. Who told you all that?" "Just been thinking about it. Easy enough to deduce. So the answer's obvious, isn't it?" "Let the gods and I know then." "The blighted city. Their home. It is close. I can feel it. Please, my lord, I beg of you to trust me just once here, that your feelings are not your own. If you have a hunch that our salvation lies within the mouth of a world-eating dragon, I would ask that you at least think twice before you have us all march in." "That's why I'm asking you." "Oh, well, I mean there's a chance it would work, and an equal chance that any sense you have is entirely false." "It wasn't before." "Nay, we agreed to disagree on that, didn't we? I'll show you my workings once we're back on clean soil." "Not going back. Going forward. No sense spreading the plague to Atalan, and no sense waiting to wither under it here. We have to find the land of Skaven blight, mythical as it might be, and have answers in one hand and fresh pelts in the other." Oldor's eyes seemed aglow in the reflection of the candlelight. Khazran tapped his fingers on the table and stood up. "There's no other choice then," he said. He downed a flagon of tasteless ale and took his leave. Oldor was left looking at the pink stars of the sickened night sky. "Seize their power," he mumbled to himself. The Legion awaited the return of a key convoy from the south, laden with ammunition, new equipment, and Thane Story, who had gone to oversee the requisition. He returned to the news that the army was waiting for him in the underway close to the city. Like so much of the world, underways built in millennia gone by were still somewhat usable in that region. Leaving a skeleton crew to oversee continuing evacuations in the city, the bulk of the Dawi left the desperate scene behind. The underway led west towards the hold of Zarexil. There was imagined hope of Dawi to be found there, yet all was either abandoned or razed. The only living things in the Carracks were Thegoreki scouts, who disappeared quickly whenever the blue lights of the legionaries fell upon the decaying chambers the rats squatted in. "My lord, I have a question," Story asked of Oldor as the convoy moved on. Oldor nodded. "Your certainty of our right direction, I wonder if it comes from communion with the same being that empowers warp fire." "The big rat," Oldor grunted. "The great rat. Great horned rat, they say. Is that right?" Story was directing the question at nearby Khazran, who gave a sulking nod. "It could be that. It's a being of chaos after all. We've been exposed to their magic, so no wonder we can sense their power." "Oh, I wish you would wander on that topic, my lord," Khazran asked with strange desperation. "Quiet!" Oldor shot back. Yes, I understand," Story nodded. "There's always been a rumour of a skaven city, their seed as it were. If we don't stamp it out, then it shall be they and not us that thrives when chaos evaporates away." "Getting ahead of us there, aren't you? Chaos aren't done yet," Khazran insisted. He was throwing his bag to the ground and unstrapping a dark powder rifle from his bag. "You seem so sure of everything these days, but you seem to be wrong at every turn," Story shot back. "Is that so? Then you'll pay no heed to that phenomena ahead?" With a growl, Oldor and Story looked carefully to the front. Their route was covered in dirty snow, with that section of the underway being one of those that was practically just a chasm at surface level. Strangely though, the snow was melting ahead of them in a wave that seemed to be approaching. "What could be causing that?" Story asked. "You can't see them," Khazran said. He had his rifle in his hands and was looking about at the rest of the legionaries. They didn't see them either, it seemed. "Look, my lord, let go of your feelings and just see what you and only you can see. Please!" There is," Oldor started, blinking at the scene ahead. Suddenly, he yelled in shock, then waved for the Legion to form a battle line. "Oh? Wait, how is that possible?" Story said as he saw it too. The advancing wave of melting snow was caused by a suddenly very obvious and very close line of Chaos warriors. To Khazran, of course, this approaching wall of armor had been visible the whole time. "A spell? How could they be using a spell on us?" Oldor grumbled. "Precisely what you need to be asking day and night, Lord," Khazran replied. "Oi, get those rockets in straight," he added to the troops behind, who were becoming aware of the imminent battle with the gradual but accelerating energy of one waking up in a place different to where they went to bed. Suddenly, the guns were blazing and thunderclaps of green fire saw the rest of the snow go up in steam. Chaos riders charged the guns. Chaos footmen braved the flames. All told, it was a hastily organized slaughter, in which the underway proved as useful an ally as the arrogant aggression of the Chaos commanders. Another Chaos detachment was silenced in short order, adding another to the impressive tally the expedition had racked up. It was but a fraction of the total across the world, yet still a brilliant boon there and then. And indeed, more umgi lives from the fallen state of Marigliano could be spared on account of it. These lands were the very fringe of human civilization, but not the fringe of the land itself. Further west, the fields turned to marsh, then to swamp, and then... what came after was poorly understood on account of its deadly nature. It was hard to return from the swamp beyond the swamps, the so-called Blight Swamp. It was a place no one had ever lived, and without gargantuan effort, no one ever would. Or so the great horned rat would have the wider world believe. The swamp stretched from tall mountains in the north to the barren coastline in the south, forming a barrier between the umgi realms of Telea and Estalia. Ask anyone in either realm, and they would say that there was simply nothing there. Ask them where people keep mysteriously disappearing to, and they would probably ask you to stop making up stories. Such was the power of the skaven magic that veiled the enormous sore on the world that housed their central nexus, the seat of their global infestation, Skaven Blight. The dripping underway brought the Dawi quite close to the center of the merciless swamp. However, the tunnel dipped down into a severely flooded section. They had to dig a new exit to the surface, which itself let streams of water flood the tunnels further. After days of work, the army was encamped on a drained-out portion of marsh. There was fog in all directions and sparse undergrowth. The ground was mostly water and mud, into which thrown pieces of junk were swallowed. Quick mud. And the air was no kinder, filled with parasitic flies that hunted the Skaven gatherers who stalked the marshes in search of edible grasses. It was an altogether miserable place, but Oldor was fired up and eager to advance deeper into it. They were close to the hidden city, he claimed, and the Dawi were at large wont to trust him. All that was needed then was a little engineering. The construction of a great pontoon from their makeshift underway exit, heading west over the swallowing swamps, began. Mud was dried on the back of the landcrawler engines, then hammered into bricks that were fired in metal ovens pieced together from spare helmets. Twin barriers marked the way forwards, with the ground between them being drained using stone melter solution pumps in reverse operation. Not for thousands of years had such work been done in those dire marshes, and never did the Skaven metropolis far below their feet suspect that anyone was approaching their inscrutable lair. Such was the slow work that carried on in the swamp. Meanwhile, far away at Karak Eight Peaks, there was a disheartening rumble. It was familiar, however it couldn't be what the locals thought. After all, the dragon ogres had been slain. Had Oldor himself not shown them the captured head of Colic Suneater and a host of his beastly followers? The memory seemed to blur as it was recalled. What was not in doubt was the scene at the gates of the Karak. Colic stood tall, eyes smoking, surrounded by both a gang of dragon ogres and an army of chaos infantry. Lines of enchained slaves pushed siege towers, and Jar traitors pointed cannons at the Karak walls. The time Oldor's campaign bought had run out.